Let's see now what happened during the Santhal Revolt.
From the beginning, the Santals of Jharkhand had been resisting and protesting the British rule. In 1855 to 56, there was a massive revolt in which the Santals began looting and killing the zamindars and the moneylenders. The Santals had declared that the British rule had come to an end and that they were making a free state of the Santals.
The biggest drawback of the revolt was that the Santals were poorly armed. They were holding only bows and arrows and were not able to withstand themselves against the gun-bearing British army. At the end of the fierce battle, 15,000 Santals were killed and their revolt was finally suppressed.
Fate of the Munda Adivasis was not better than the Santhal Adivasis. Between 1874 and 1901, the Munda Adivasis of Chota Nagpur Plateau, which is now the state of Jharkhand, came together under the leadership of a young man named Birsa to do away with the British rule. Birsa was thought as Bhagwan and people were ready to follow his every words.
They wanted to do away with the foreign government that protected the zamindars, the moneylenders and the courts of law that had deprived the Mundas of their lands and their rights over the forests. In the end, the Munda rebellion was suppressed by arresting the leaders and putting them behind bars. Birsa Munda died in prison in 1900. However, the government was compelled to make laws to protect the rights of the Adivasis of Chota Nagpur.
Because of the forest departments and its laws, revolt broke out in the Kumaon region of Uttarakhand. In the Kumaon region of Uttarakhand, the peasants refused to cooperate with the forest department and protest against the fact that their rights over the forests have been taken away by the government.
They openly broke the rules of the forest department. Attempts were also made to burn the jungles used by the contractors, the people, even to do forced labor for the forest department. Because of these movements, the British were forced to change its policies. In many places, they made their rules lenient, and in many areas, the British made new laws saying that the people from outside cannot purchase the lands of the Adivasis. Sitaramaraju is one such name which will not be forgotten when it comes to the forest rules of the British and the tribal revolts against it.
Alluri Sitaramaraju was born on July 4, 1897 in Pandarangi village in Vishakhapatnam district. His mother was from Vishakhapatnam and his father from Mogallu near Bhimavaram and was an official photographer in the central jail at Rajamundri. Raju's father died when he was in school and he grew up under the care of his uncle Ramachandra Raju.
After the passing of 1882 Madras Forest Act, its restriction on the free movement of the tribal people in forest prevented them from engaging in their traditional Podu agricultural system. Raju led a protest movement in the border area of East Godavari and Vishakhapatnam districts of Andhra Pradesh. Raju was inspired by the patriotic zeal of the revolutionaries of Bengal. He raided the police stations in and around Chintapalli, Rampachodavaram, Dammanapalli, Krishnadevipeta, Rajavammangi, Addatigala, Narsipatnam and Annavaram. Raju and his followers stole guns and ammunition and had killed many army officers including Scott Coward near Dammanapalli. In 1922, the British deployed a company of Assam Rifles near Pegadapalli under the leadership of Saunders. Raju, who had gone underground by then, resurfaced after 4 months and continued to fight the strengthened by the tribal volunteers using bows and arrows under the leadership of Malludora and Gantamdora. The British campaign lasted for nearly a year starting from 1922. Ramaraju was eventually trapped by the British in the forests of Chintapalli and shot him dead with a rifle in Mampa village. Another important name that surfaces while speaking about tribal freedom and revolt is Komaram Bhim.
Komaram Bhim was born in the year 1900 at Sankepalli village in Adilabad. His father was killed in an attack by the forest department when he was just 15. Then Bhim's family migrated to Sardarpur village in Kermeri Mandal.
While Bhim was leading his life by jhum farming, a Jagirdar named Siddiqui, an informer of the Nizam, occupied Bhim's land. In a fit of rage, Bhim killed Siddiqui and escaped from the police and hid himself in Assam. After that, for 5 years, he worked as a laborer in coffee and tea plantations. He experienced labor agitations there. He also learnt to read and write. He learnt the situation at his place through his friend Komaram Suri, who was his secret informer. He was inspired by the agitations and battles for freedom by Alluri Sitaramaraju in Vishakhapatnam and Birsa Munda revolt against the Nizam rule.
By that time, the Nizam government had started collecting tax in the name of Bambram for grazing cattle and for collecting firewood for cooking. Adivasis were impressed and inspired by the message Jal Jangal Jameen of Komaram Bhim to oppose the tax and fight for tribal freedom and right. Nearly 12 villages in Adilabad were ready to fight for land. Bhim formed a guerrilla army with the young men of Gondu and Koya. They gathered and trained the tribal people to fight with weapons. Jodeghat became the central place from where he started the guerrilla battle. The Nizams were surprised by these attacks of Bhim's troops and attempted to attack the Adivasis. Finally, on one full moon night, Bhim died in the battle against the Nizam army in Jodeghat forests. After his death, Nizam appointed Hemendorf to do some research on the lives of the tribal people. In the 1850s, some Indian cloth mills were set up with much courage, first in Mumbai and then in Ahmedabad. Thus, cloth came to be made on machines in India. Some educated people and factory owners demanded that some tax be levied on cloth coming from Britain so that the cloth being made in India might get a protected market. The special tax made the British cloth more expensive, and this would encourage the sale of cloth produced in Indian factories.
In Britain, the government levied special tax on the cloth made by Indian weavers in order to help the cloth industry of Britain, but the government refused to levy a similar tax in India on British cloth to help Indian industry. The pressure of the British factory owners and traders on the government was so much that it could do nothing against their interests. In 1896, the British government of India experienced a severe reduction in its income. The government began to think of ways in which it could increase its income. It was then, in the hour of difficulty, that the government levied a 3.5% tax on the cloth coming to India from Britain. But in order to prevent any harm to the sale of British cloth, the government levied the same amount of tax, that is 3.5%, on the cloth being made in India as well.
The imposing of this tax was not easy for the Indian people to accept, and this became one of the causes of the long-drawn conflict between the Indian people and British government. By imposing tax on goods made in Indian factories, the government has made it clear that it would protect mainly the interests of the British factories. There was strong opposition in this tax in India and persistent demands to remove it. Even without government, factories producing cloth, thread, sugar, paper, jute, matches, cement, etc. were set up in India, but their rapid development took place only after 1914.